and I'm welcoming all you fabulous Ledge reps, and any other school board members, of course, are welcome to this July's Ledge Rep Network meeting. My name is Marissa Rathbone, and I am your Director of Strategic Advocacy. In addition to myself, Mike Hoover is our advocacy consultant. He is here with us today as well. In his best attire, oh my goodness, thanks, Mike. I love it.
I only get a couple times a year to wear this.
You know, you got to dress the part like a true parliament.
And then they can.
That's excellent.
They can just share the,
Oh, I'm going to mute Sarah, although I'm sure she'll have valuable things to say later. I don't think she meant to do that this time. So anyway, welcome. So happy you're here. If you wouldn't mind, for the benefit of especially our newbies who are joining the fold, we've got a few new Ledge reps newly elected into that role. If you wouldn't mind in the chat typing your school district and the number of years you've served, your name will automatically pop up with your chat post. And then that way folks can know who else is in the room. I'll just give a little context. The Ledge Rep Network meeting is hosted one time a month. Right now we're hosting it the first Tuesday of every month at noon, with the hope that folks can step away during a lunch break if it's during a work day for y'all. And at the very least, because they're recorded, they're made available for folks to view afterwards. This is a way for you all to come together to learn about what's going on with your organization, WSSDA, what the advocacy cycle is looking like for this month, and what some of your key steps or actions might be for this month. And then also as a way for you to share best practices or things you've tried or questions that you have, so that those of you who are here and have been doing this role maybe for a little bit longer than others can share some of the things that you've learned while being a Ledge rep or just while being a school board member that might be helpful as you navigate the year-round advocacy cycle. So again, thanks for being here. Be sure to check out the names in the post. Usually we have folks from across the state joining, and so you get lots of really great perspective from one another, and we try to troubleshoot with you. So this is supposed to be sort of an informal, friendly webinar system. So if you have a question at any point throughout the presentation, please be free just to put it in the chat. And then when I take a breath, I will be sure to turn to it. I'll either ask the question or ask you to ask it live. So again, thanks so much for spending your noontime with us. Today's primary focus is going to be on unpacking the General Assembly Handbook, because it just was released yesterday. Woo! On time. I love it when we make deadlines. We set that deadline for us a long time ago, and we met it. And I will tell you, it is a full staff lift. We actually have an editing party. Yes, it's a party. We all sit around and take multiple pages of the draft handbook and make sure all the commas are in the right place. However, I recognize that we will probably put a comma in the wrong place somewhere or miss one, and we rely on you all to find those for us. So you let us know if you see anything that's not quite right, and we will be sure to correct it. We can do that with the document as it's posted. So I'm going to walk you through how to find the handbook, the information that you need to prepare for the handbook. We're going to walk through the handbook. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how you might unpack the handbook with your own board this month in preparation for some upcoming key dates. So I'm going to share my screen to start, so that perhaps if you've already found the handbook online, although it was sent to everyone's inboxes from our communications team yesterday, if you for some reason didn't receive it, please check your spam. You might have spammed WSSDA in that case, and good for you to know that, because we do send out weekly emails to membership with pertinent information. Yesterday was a special Monday send out because of the posting of the handbook. So if you want to find it on your own or tell your friends how to find it, you would go to WSSDA's homepage under Training and Events. General Assembly is one of our biggest events of the year. Annual conference is the biggest, but General Assembly would be second. Go ahead and just click on General Assembly. And I'm going to just walk through a little bit about General Assembly. I know some folks here are new to the ledge rep role, although you may already be familiar with General Assembly as an event. Just want to remind you that General Assembly occurs every year in the fall, typically the third week of September, although that's subject to change. That's not in our bylaws anywhere, but that seems to be what works best for your annual calendars. And during that time, the membership has the opportunity to vote, to debate and vote on legislative positions, permanent positions, and bylaws. All of those are proposals coming from school boards to start the General Assembly. And then after the debate occurs, it's a vote of the membership who is present, and then the majority carries the vote forward. So if a proposal passes, it becomes part of our official platform. If it does not pass, it is put to the side for the year, although oftentimes it comes back the next year as a issue area. But for that year, if it does not pass, it does not become part of our WSSDA platform. This year, the meeting will be held, the assembly will be held on September 20th and 21st. So that's a Friday, Saturday. If you are joining as a voting delegate, we'll talk a little bit about roles here in a bit, but every board has the opportunity to designate a voting delegate. Sometimes that role is shared by multiple members of the board, but only one board member can vote at a time on behalf of their board at General Assembly. So we would never have any more than 295 voting delegates at a time. And that would be a dream if that were to happen. Last year, I think our record was about 130 to 140 voting delegates. When the General Assembly becomes live, we'll have a live link right here. If you click on this right now, it'll take you to nowhere, because luckily we don't do General Assembly year round. It's just for 2 fabulous days. On the day of the event, if you have any questions or technical needs, there is a general email address that you'll be able to use to ask questions if you're having any technical trouble. You will be able to participate either in person at the SeaTac Hilton or virtual in case you don't have the ability to travel this year. You will be able to vote remotely. So we do host a hybrid General Assembly. Registration is not quite open yet, so this is just a good time to be thinking about who's on first for the next month and unpacking the General Assembly Handbook. Once that registration is live, probably within the next couple of weeks, you'll be able to register your district, at which time you will get a voting delegate credential, which means that will be the unique registration ID that will allow you to log in the day of the event. I'm sorry, it's not the Hilton, it's the Seattle Airport 4 Point Sheridan. I got my meetings mixed up, but it will be in SeaTac. So that way, if you or your voting delegate from your board does decide to fly in, it'll be easily accessible to the airport. Anybody can watch. So at this same link, there will be an opportunity for folks to just log in and watch the event or listen to the event, whatever the case may be. Only voting delegates with their own unique registration ID will actually be able to log into the event itself and participate as a debater and a voter. You are representing, I say you, oftentimes it ends up being the ledge rep who is designated as the voting delegate, but whomever that is, the voting delegate is representing their board and their board's interest during that voting process. And then just an overview of sort of the timeline of what happens. We are at the place in the year where all proposals have been submitted. The first draft of the General Assembly Handbook has been published. There will be an amendment process available. I'll walk you through that in a bit, but that will be done entirely virtually online prior to General Assembly. There will be no live amendments this year. So the proposal for amendments, the proposal window for amendments will be open on August 1st and will close on August 7th, making July a particularly important time for y'all in unpacking the handbook and making some determinations amongst your board if there are any amendments that you wish to submit for any of the proposals that are in the handbook. Then in the instance that we have 2 or more districts that submit, boards that submit proposed amendments to the same proposal, we will hold informal conference committee meetings with the aim to reach an agreement potentially about the amendment that has been submitted. So let's say there's a position proposal and one school district submits a change to the word. I'm trying to think of an example, a descripting word for graduation requirements. And then another board submits a different word to describe graduation requirements. They're pretty similar, but they're not exactly the same. The ICC, or Informal Conference Committee, is designed to discuss the proposed amendment, and if it's possible to come to agreement for a single amendment that will unify you and your proposal, and also minimize the number of distinct votes that have to take place during the General Assembly. That's the aim for that. If there is not consensus or agreement from the boards that submitted, that's fine too. Then there will just be 2 separate amendment proposals that would come forward on that proposal. As such, there will be a second version, a second and final version of the handbook that will be released on August 16th, so mid-August. That gives you at least 30 days. We are required in the bylaws to ensure that the final version of the handbook is posted no less than 30 days prior to General Assembly. So that will give you a little bit more than 30 days to look at any final proposals to the General Assembly handbook and the proposals therein. Then we'll host General Assembly September 20th and 21st. After that, there will be a prioritization opportunity. So all of the legislative positions that are part of the WSSDA platform. So those will be either new positions that have been adopted during General Assembly, revised positions that have been adopted during General Assembly, or existing positions that aren't even part of the discussion this year because we already have a bunch in the queue. Those will all be prioritizable. If that's a word, the legislative positions will be prioritizable, and that will inform our legislative priorities for the next legislative session. Those will be formally adopted by the WSSDA board and released in October, so you can start sharing them with your legislators. The first day of the next legislative session is January 13th. Get ready for it. Here we go. It's a long session, 105 days. And when I say long, that's exactly what I mean. It will be long and there will be lots of things to talk about. And we will be right at the table sharing your perspectives based on your WSSDA position platform. So that was a lot of me talking. I'm just going to take a little breath and I'm going to look to see if you have any questions. I don't see any. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to navigate the handbook. Again, like I said, if you want to interrupt me from talking, please feel free to put a comment in there and then I can take a breath and then I can give you an opportunity to chat amongst yourselves. So with that, I'm going to basically tell you to access the General Assembly handbook, you would download it here. I've already done that to save us any sort of technology challenges, which means I'm stopping my share. And then I'm gonna reshare my screen. And here we go. So way back in the olden days, we did used to print out the General Assembly handbook. It was an actual handbook that was shared at the in-person legislative assembly, as it used to be called. Because we've moved into a hybrid format, there will not be printed or mailed versions of a handbook that will be disseminated. So you are responsible for printing your own handbook. If you don't have access to that in your own home office, I would encourage you to request it from your school district, as this is part of your official board work. And it's sure nice to have it in color. We have an amazing graphic designer, Robbie McClellan, who has done his best to make sure that it is easy for you to read and enjoyable for you to read, with lots of words in between. So there's always a welcome from your WSSDA chair as well as your standing committee chairs. So this year, Sandy Hayes is your WSSDA board president and will be the presiding officer over the assembly. Trey Ising is the chair of the resolutions committee, which oversees the recommendations for the permanent position proposals. And then Lakeisha Phillips is the WSSDA legislative committee chair, and she chairs the legislative committee that oversees the recommendations for the legislative position proposals. Thanks for being here, Lakeisha. as well as Marisa Peliquin, who is this year's vice chair. So just a little welcome to let you know that during General Assembly, you have really 3 areas of business. You review proposals to WSSDA bylaws, which are the governing body, the governing language around the organization as a whole. The permanent positions, which establish WSSDA's core beliefs and values, and then the legislative positions, which indicate WSSDA's advocacy interests. Those tend to be a little bit more timely, pertinent to things that might be going on in current legislative agendas, including the interests of legislators, both at the state and federal levels. Table of contents to help you orient what major sections are in the handbook. We're just going to walk through them. Rules of procedure will, these are essentially the same as last year with a few tweaks, and I'll point those out here momentarily. You as a body will adopt the rules of procedure at the start of the assembly, and it lays out how you will conduct your business for the entire event. Just as a reminder, during General Assembly, you'll be reviewing position proposals that include WSSDA's general business operations, so those are the bylaws, new permanent positions, existing permanent positions that are bringing forward potential revisions, either changes to existing positions or proposed consolidations. That means you're taking 2 or more positions and making them 1, or you're retiring a position entirely, which means it's no longer pertinent to the work and or it has been accomplished. We always love to see that. Maybe someday we'll be able to retire some funding positions. Wouldn't that be cool? And then you'll also be looking at new legislative position proposals, as well as legislative positions that are suggested for revision. Either the existing position language will change, or 2 or more positions being suggested for consolidation, or an existing position being suggested for retirement. Delegates. Each board, each of the 295 school boards in the state of Washington gets to appoint 1 voting delegate to vote on their behalf. Now, I say that only 1 voting delegate can vote on behalf of their board at a time. In past General Assemblies, it has been known that the voting delegate has shared credentials on behalf of the board. So you might have someone who can only do Friday and then somebody else who can do Saturday. It is perfectly acceptable for the Friday voting delegate to pass the credential. And by that, I mean, it's a unique code to the Saturday voting delegate from the board. And then on Saturday, that person can log on behalf of the board, but only 1 voting delegate per school board at a time is allowed to participate.
Right.
The regular agenda is laid out in the handbook. Essentially, the agenda is the voting order, and we'll walk through that here momentarily. Every year there's an opportunity to have a consent agenda, and by nature of a consent agenda, it is intended that that be position proposals that are coming forward that hopefully don't require too much debate. They are a little more cut and dry. There is a consent agenda this year, and it comes at the very beginning of General Assembly, as consent agendas often do for official board business. At that time, we will need a voting delegate to bring a motion forward and someone second, with at least 4 other delegates to agree that they want to move the consent agenda forward. There will be an opportunity to take 1 or more of the positions off. I'll dig into that here when you actually see the list. There will be an opportunity to debate each of the proposals. The voting delegate will be able, through a drop-down menu, to request to speak pro or request to speak con. 5 minutes will be given to each of those stances. So 5 minutes on the pro stance, 5 minutes on the con stance. They don't have to go in any particular order. So once the 5 minutes for each has been exhausted, or once there are no more folks who have asked to request or requested to speak, then a vote will be called. Point of order and other motions. So last year we had a bit of I'm just going to call it a debacle, because it sure felt like that. A lot of calls to question. And the calls to question really confused, I think, a lot of the participating voting delegates and delayed a lot of the business. So for clarity's sake, point of order is the language being used this year, and it is specifically when a delegate believes a parliamentary rule has been broken or is in the process of being broken. That's when point of order can be used. Other motions that can be called will be specified a little bit closer to the event. I'm happy to take a pause too, Mike, since you're the pro here, if you want to insert anything into this conversation. Anything I should be saying right here?
Sorry. No, I don't think so. I mean, one of the points I would make, especially to the would-be parliamentarians out there, is we are sort of consolidating point of order, point of inquiry, all of that into one for the ease of the membership. So pretty much if you have a question, and you can actually ask, this is not your only way to ask a question. Like you could ask me, you could ask Marissa, you could do that. But to formally ask anything, you would stand to a point of order, although I believe everything is a drop-down menu, right? You don't really stand, because I think that's our way to accommodate the hybrid. Does that mean, this will inspire confidence, Marissa, does that mean everybody in person will also have to use a computer to do a motion?
That's correct.
Okay, yeah. So
Yeah.
it'll automatically come up, and then, so it can be used both, I think, interchangeably for, I have a question about what's going on. You don't ask a question about the substance, you just, what's going on, or are we following the right process? Those are pretty much the way this would come up.
That's great. Thanks, Mike. And just to help appease or help with any nerves you might have if this is your first time or you're a little bit uneasy with using technology, when we get closer to the event, we will host multiple trainings around this content in a deeper way, as well as how to use the technology. So Mike's question is well timed. Whether you are joining in person or remotely, everyone will be voting from a same platform. So that creates equity and participation, equality and participation. So folks who are in the room or remotely will be having the same voting experience by using the same platform to get in the queue, to take a vote, to make motions, etc. So we'll be going through that training closer to the event with the software company that we use and have been using for the last several years. They're really great, and we've been able to refine the process from year to year. Voting, I think I've covered this, but there will be a vote taken for each proposal, and there are, I think, 49 distinct proposals laid out in the handbook. We'll just say less than 50 at this point. And the General Assembly handbook in its current version is version 1. There will be, like I said, a version 2 because we anticipate that amendments will be submitted during that window. And therefore, we hope you will take a look in the month of July and have some discussion around the content and the proposals in front of you. And then we do hope that you revisit it between August 17th and September 19th leading up to General Assembly, as there will be some changes. So version 1 and version 2 are important to note. And we will call the General Assembly to order at 9 a.m. on Friday, September 20th. We will complete business, taking votes on all of the proposals in front of you. In the past, the last couple of years, General Assembly has ended on Saturday afternoon, and I'm not noting the exact time, but I think it's been anywhere between 1 and 5 p.m. So we generally recommend that you anticipate spending all day Friday and all day Saturday as a part of General Assembly. We can't anticipate the end time because that will depend on the length of debate for each of the proposals in front of the body. And then parliamentary authority, the last several years we have had a parliamentary advisory committee, but again, to ease the process for membership, the WSSDA board determined that we will return to having a parliamentarian advise the presiding officer, and our very capable and wonderful experienced parliamentarian and advocacy advisor Mike Hoover will be serving in that role. So when you join the General Assembly, you will note that this year Sandy Hayes will be the presiding officer as the WSSDA board president, and Mike, among several other leaders within WSSDA as an organization, will be on the stage in case questions come up. But certainly Sandy and Mike will work closely together to ensure that parliamentary rule is followed. Anything that you wanted to share about that, Mike, while I'm here?
I can talk as little or as much as you want on that. Now, if you're wondering what my qualifications are, I will tell you I watched like 2 YouTube videos on it. So I'm feeling pretty, well, I scanned one of them. No, I've been through a series of bad life choices. I have been a parliamentarian for going on 3 decades for the House of Representatives, the Senate, King County Council. I just finished being the parliamentarian for the Association of Counties last week. So I'm almost close to getting how this works.
Got a little experience under your belt. I like that, a series of bad life choices. Okay, a little bit about the amendment process. This is fairly self-explanatory, although I'm sure you're curious what will the form look like. And if you remember or used the form to submit proposals during spring, it will look similar to that. But in a nutshell, it will open at 8 a.m. on August 1st. So the only amendments that you can submit are on proposals that are in the handbook this year. So let's say there's a position in the existing WSSDA platform that you would really like to change, but you didn't remember that you wanted to change it until just now. Unfortunately, you will not be able to do that if it's not already in the General Assembly handbook. That would have to wait until next year. That's the good news about this, though, is that you always have a chance later to submit amendment proposals. I'm sorry, proposals to existing positions, since we do that every spring. So for the sake of this year, you would be looking at only the proposals in the handbook and amendments as adopted by your board that you would like to submit during that August 1st through August 7th window, which is why it's so important that during your 1 or more meetings this July, whether it's during a regular meeting and you have time set aside on your agenda, or you actually have a work session to unpack the handbook and do some discussion there, that you be fully prepared in advance of August 1st to submit any proposed amendments. Now, you certainly don't have to submit any amendments at this time, but if you want to, the discussion to do so would be occurring this month based on what you see in this handbook. That amendment proposal will close on August 7th. Like I explained earlier, we will hold informal conference committee meetings only if necessary. So this is a heads up that if your board submits a proposed amendment to a proposal, there is a chance you will be asked to represent your board on August 12th, 13th, or 14th during an online or virtual informal conference committee with any other submitting districts to have a discussion around potentially coalescing around a single amendment to that position proposal. Again, it will be consensus, and if you can't reach it, that's okay too, but we will host a conversation at the very least. We talked at extent about this. Mike, anything else that you'd like to add to that part of the conversation?
No, I would really encourage everybody. I know everybody on this call is getting it, but make sure your colleagues know about this amendment deadline, because in my experience, that is the thing that seems to surprise people the most. I just went through this, like I said, last week with a similar group, and in my opinion, we sent out about 3,000 messages on it. I still had people show up and say they'd never heard of this amendment deadline. So it's not the point of it is not to shut down debate. The point of it is to organize debate. So please get this in on time. This is your chance.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Good reminder. And we will send maybe not 3,000, maybe just 2,000 messages out to remind y'all through our member updates, our general member updates that come out every Thursday. It'll be there through our LegRep network, communication from the legislative committee and the resolutions committees that this amendment window is available to all of the school boards across the state. After it closes on August 7th and the conference committees come together as needed, then we will post a final handbook by August 16th. So that will give you another month in between when the final handbook is posted and the actual event for you to convene again with your board to recognize any changes to the handbook and how you all might want to respond through debate and your vote during the General Assembly, which occurs September 20th and 21st. So that's the amendment window and a little bit of the timeline. I realize I'm repeating myself on some of this, but hopefully that will serve to be helpful to remind you about where and when you need to be. How to read this handbook. So there are some icons to help you navigate. Just remember that sometimes you're looking at a permanent position, which starts with language that says WSSDA believes, or a legislative position that begins by saying WSSDA shall initiate or support legislation that. Those are important distinctions, although both permanent and legislative positions are utilized when determining how we weigh in as an organization during the legislative session. There will also be an opportunity for emergency proposals to come forward to the WSSDA board and also to General Assembly, and I'll explain those as it's laid out towards the end. Oops, actually, nope, I'm going to do it right here because it's right here. So we will open up the process for emergency position proposals starting September 1st, and we'll close on September 11th. And when the word emergency is included there as a descriptor, it truly is an emergency. We've had a couple of those the last few years. So as an example, several years ago, there was an emergency position proposal that came forward prior to General Assembly on what WSSDA's stance should be as it related to mandatory vaccinations. And so that was timely and responsive to what was going on at that time. And we didn't have as much information during the spring of that year. And so the emergency proposal was warranted. So I guess my recommendation is truly think about, are you submitting something because it's a true emergency or because you just forgot to submit it in the spring? If it can wait till next spring, it's not a true emergency. And I would recommend that be the case. The WSSDA board will review and make a recommendation to the body, regardless of potentially come forward to, I'm sorry, that's incorrect. The board does get an opportunity actually to say whether it will come forward to General Assembly or not. In the last round of emergency proposals, when they came through, the board did bring them forward to General Assembly, but they have the authority to not bring them forward to General Assembly if they feel it's not a true emergency. I'm happy to field questions if you got more of those, but the proposal form notification will also be posted to the website, but this lays out the information that you would need to include in case your board determines that you would like to do this. Okay. Now into the meat and potatoes of the handbook. So the voting order is the agenda of the meeting, and it lays out in order of your vote which position proposals will come forward before the next. And so this is really operational in nature, so there's nothing codified in the bylaws that say which
who are those for?
First.
Matthew.
And so what made the most sense was to bring a consent agenda item first, and I'll go through that in a moment. Then to tackle the bylaws. There are 2 bylaw proposals this year. And then to start digging into the position proposals in alphabetical order by category, and then combined permanent and legislative positions. So we start with bylaws, then we go to association operations, which is one of the 6 categories. We start with permanent positions. If there were association operations only exist in permanent positions. So then we'd move to capital facilities and school construction, starting with permanent position proposals, then moving on to legislative positions, starting with amended, and then moving on to new. And then there are a handful, less than a handful of consolidations and retirements that have been proposed as well. So you'll start to see the pattern here. Then we move to funding, amended proposals for permanent, new proposals for permanent, amended proposals for legislative, new proposals for legislative. So permanent positions first, then legislative, amendment, then new, retired, and consolidated. So they are numbered. So let me just check my memory here. Looks like less than 50. So if each of those took the full 10 minutes of debate, you'd be looking at about 500 minutes of total. I'm not good. Math is not my strong suit, but you can imagine why, with necessary breaks and pauses and lunch and breathing, that it could potentially take a full 2 days to accomplish all of the goals of General Assembly. Any questions that y'all have? Y'all awfully quiet out there. Awfully quiet. Please feel free to type a question in the chat if you have it.
I'm Marissa.
Yeah, Jen.
Can you explain again? You had already talked about this, but the positions that have amendments coming to the same position, how those will they just be incorporated by the committee, or can you just talk again about how that's going to work?
Yeah, you bet. Let me back up. And if any of you are new to this and you are confused, it's okay. You are not alone, I promise you. It takes years to get a sense for this. So let's just take, I'm just going to actually give an example with an actual position, because that might make it more helpful. Sorry for the dizziness here. So this is the first proposal outside of the bylaws that will be in the handbook. So this is a proposal to an existing permanent position, which are actually goals. And so you'll see laid out here that this is the current position. It's a permanent position. These are the words that have already been adopted by membership. There was a proposal from Woodland, Onalaska, and Meade school districts to amend that current permanent position to strike through this language and add this language. And then you'll have a clean amended position. So let's say during the August 1st through 7th amendment window, another school board wants to come forward and change the word, change the language of opposes any and all to, I'm trying to think of an example, won't fully support, or something to that effect, right? So it's germane to the original amendment, but it's different language for consideration. So the amendment window will be an online form. Essentially, the board who wants to submit that would put forward what the current proposal language has, and then do the strike through and the additions. Basically say, this is the way we'd like to see something changed. That'll be submitted through an online form and staff will organize it. Let's say another school board submits a proposed amendment that says opposes just some legislation. You know, so it's not exactly the same, but the sentiment is in the same space. So we would bring those two school boards together, a representative from each of those school boards, to say, you submitted something that said won't fully support, and you submitted something that says will oppose just some legislation. Those are closely related. Let's discuss a little bit about what you're trying to get to. Is there any way y'all can come together on consensus language? And then they would discuss that and potentially coalesce around a single amendment. And that means in the version 2 of the handbook, instead of there being 2 amendments to this amendment proposal, there would only be 1, if they agree.
Okay, so so if there's any potential contradiction that might be coming forward, that will be resolved in that process, so that once we do the voting, all voting can be incorporated into our final loss of positions cleanly.
I can never promise to resolve all conflict before the actual event.
Fair enough.
If there is a shared interest in bringing forward an amendment that meets the needs of both boards, then yes, then there will still be an amendment that'll come forward, but perhaps it'll just be one instead of two. But those two boards may decide, no, we just can't agree. And in which case, then you would vote separately on those two amendments as proposed.
With only one, yeah, with only one succeeding. Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Yeah, or two may succeed, and then if there's conflict, we have a position subcommittee who would then be convened after General Assembly to determine how that conflict could be resolved. This has not ever happened before, so I'm not exactly sure how it would work. They will either bring it forward to WSSDA board for consideration, or the positions would remain as they are and it would come forward at the next General Assembly. It would depend on how conflicty that conflict is.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Good question. All right, clear as mud. All right, close your eyes for a second. I'm just going to scroll back up so that we can walk through the various sections of your voting order. So the first item up is a consent agenda item. And just to note that for each of the proposals, you'll have a title or a descriptor, in this case, what the standing committee or board recommended. So you'll see either do pass or do not pass. Remember, that's just a recommendation. Each voting delegate gets to represent their board with a pro or con, whatever works best for your board and community. So this is just purely a recommendation. And then you'll note which district or districts submitted the proposal. For a consent agenda item, you have a list here. If my memory serves me right, there's 38 positions on this list that currently reference a type of funding. In some cases, they say fully. In some cases, they say amply. In some cases, they say full. In some cases, they say ample. Depends on the tense and all of that. What this consent agenda item is proposing is that the body would streamline the description of the funding that you all seek, so that whatever it says currently would be replaced with amply, fully, and sustainably. So if it just says fully now and you adopt this consent agenda, it will be replaced with amply, fully, and sustainably. With any consent agenda item, a motion of one board seconded by a second and agreement of 5 total boards to remove any one of these is possible and would be debated separately. So that is an option. I'm going to pause and let Mike explain consent agenda items in more detail because I'm explaining it at a very high level. Anything else you'd add?
No, I actually think you're doing a great job. Yeah, it is a way to just like it sounds. It's things that we think are so non-controversial that they can be done with a simple vote all at once. It's a consent item instead of having to take them up one by one. And the legislature and other bodies do this too. They do a similar kind of a thing. And you can with the saving grace for anybody who doesn't like something is you have the ability to take something off of the consent agenda and say, I don't agree with that. That's over and above the ability to vote the whole thing down. If you said, I agree with all of these, but not 26, I don't know what 26 is, by the way. I want to vote on 26 separately. But this is, yeah, I think you got it.
Great. Thanks, Mike. So anyway, worth taking a look at. Just so you know, I have looked at each one of these positions many, many times over. And were the body to adopt this consent agenda item as presented, it would make sense for amply, fully, and sustainably, or ample, full, and sustainable to be added as a descriptor to the descriptor language for funding for each of these. So that will be an administrative call by staff, what tense we use, but the sentiment will be the same throughout. And the benefit will be unification of the type of funding we're looking for as one voice as you're advocating with the legislature. So that's the consent agenda. And then as with all proposals, there is a rationale statement from the submitting district provided at the bottom. And if for some reason the legislative committee, resolutions committee, or WSDA board provided a do not pass recommendation, then you would also see a rationale for the reasoning of a do not pass. So you'll see here there is not that because the Ledge Committee gave it a do pass recommendation. So we've got the consent agenda first, then we've got 2 bylaw proposals. So you'll note that these are amendments to existing articles within the bylaws. Both of these bylaw proposals received a do not pass recommendation from the WSDA Board of Directors. You'll note here that this proposal was submitted by 11 different boards, exactly the same. So as with all of them, if it's an existing position or part of the bylaws, it will list what the current language is, and then what it would look like as submitted with proposed amendments. So anything that's being newly proposed would be underlined. Anything that is suggested as removal would be struck through. Then were this to be adopted by the body, this is what the article, how the article would read. The rationale from the submitting districts as to why they submitted this proposal is provided. And then the board rationale for a do not pass recommendation is provided here. So if you're looking at 48 proposals, 48 different proposals, I would highly recommend that you look at the rationale statements. It gives background from the submitting district or districts, as well as in some cases where there's a do not pass recommendation, some background as to the why there. And then a conversation amongst you and your fellow board members to discuss where you land in that conversation. One way that I know some school boards do this is that they list each of the titles of or they list it 1 through 48. And you can decide if it's a unified do pass, you just move on. Where there might be some concerns is where you could have some debate and determine whether or not the majority of your board would like to see a vote con on the position proposal as opposed to a vote pro. So probably a conversation for us to have at our August meeting. I'd love to hear from some of you in detail how you all navigate reviewing each of the position proposals. I'm just going to move through a few more, and I want to give Mike a chance to walk through our new and awesome little cheat sheet at the end on Robert's rules. So let me skip forward to position proposals and just call out a few things to notice. We already sort of went through that one. You got association operations. So I'm going to go to position proposals here on this one is a permanent position. You'll see because it's green, and then it's under the capital facilities and school construction category. So here's the current language as already adopted by membership. And then where you see an underline is proposed new language, where you see a strike through is removed language. And then were you to adopt it with those additions and subtractions, this is the way it would read following that pro vote. And then you will see in some cases there's going to be 2 sentences describing the rationale from the submitting district or districts. And in other cases, there are going to be multiple sections and some links that would be potentially beneficial for your board to take a look through. So each one is laid out like this, but a little different depending on if it's an existing position with proposed amendments to it, or if it's a new position proposal. So I just want to call out what a new position proposal might look like. And then I'm going to jump ahead to the end and then field some questions. Sorry for the dizziness. These are all amendments to existing positions. You'll note that the majority of proposals are to existing positions. However, this one is a new position proposal. You'll see there's less text because there's less to explain. It's a proposed new position. So nothing on the platform currently says this exact stuff. It's not specific. There's nothing specific to Clean Buildings Act funding. So were you to adopt this, this would be all new to the WSDA platform, and here's the rationale from the submitting district. So a little bit shorter text, less to unpack there. And still laid out in the same way with recommendations. So that's going to be the same for all the position proposals. Now I'm gonna I'm going to span ahead here to the end of book, where we have an appendix with a resource on parliamentary guidance. And I would turn to Mike to kind of walk us through how this might be helpful and what's in it.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, parliamentary process, I always wonder how to start with this because I know there's people at different interest levels and different experience levels. The first thing I would say is don't be intimidated by it. I think this is stuff that helps us conduct our business. And if you have a question about something and you want to know how to do something, you can ask me, you can ask somebody. I tend to do, for a lot of groups, I like to script things in advance for somebody if you need to fit something in. This cheat sheet is just here to help take a look at some of the most common things. Parliamentary process is, or procedure, it comes about from group dynamics is really what it is. And you're all familiar with that. Just like in a classroom, you can't have all 30 of your students or 20 or 18 talking at once. Parliamentary procedure is kind of the same thing. It is a way to let us do business in a certain order or certain rules so that we get through it. You only have a limited amount of time. You have to get this stuff done in 2 days, but it is nowhere near as important as all the stuff in this handbook that came before. Just like with a sporting event, nobody's watching basketball because they want to see how the refs are going to rule, right? That's not why you watch it. And I feel that way about parliamentary procedure. We have the rules to help you keep your business going, but I want it to be background. I want it to fade into the background. WSDA is a very collegial body, unlike some. I give you an example like the legislature. This is the rule book for the legislature. Tons of pages in tiny, tiny print. That is because they are an adversarial body. That doesn't make them bad. It's just a different way of approaching things. They're very adversarial. We are a very collegial body. So we have a much smaller rule book. We do use Robert's rules, but we don't even completely adhere strictly to that. We do a lot of abbreviations. We do a lot of things that are meant to be used to help us get things done in a way that a collegial body would use. Like, for example, your conference committees. Your conference committees are a way to get things done before we get through to the main body, so that if there's things that can be resolved ahead of time, we resolve them ahead of time. Motions are how you would make bring business before the body. These are some motions that may or may not come up. The first one is just the form of a motion. You make a motion, and I'm just trying to do this in both a parliamentary way, but also I'm aware that you're going to have a computer script that you pull down menu. So you pull down the thing you want to do and you fill out wherever it's appropriate to make a motion. The most common ones you would get, I think, might be to a point of order, and somebody already, I think I've been watching the chat and it's gone a little fast for me, so I didn't see all of it. Point of order would be a common one if you were confused about what was going on, not necessarily, or wanted to know what was coming next, or you wanted to make sure we were following a process correctly. There is a motion to postpone debate. That would be a little used one, I think. But if you thought that there was a good reason to postpone debate, because, for example, I think you have the ability to swap tag team delegates, for instance, and if the body wanted to wait for somebody that couldn't be here to be here, or they wanted to wait so they could talk with somebody, that would be a motion you would make to let that happen, keeping in mind that you only have the 2 days, but that could be one. If you thought you made a motion and then you wanted to withdraw it, there's a way to go ahead and do that. I can't scroll down, Marissa. I'm trying to see what we finally settled on. These are not all the motions you can make. But if you go from the chart down, you can see a very general. This does not cover all of Robert's rules. It does not cover all of our rules. Very general introduction of what is this and when would I use it? And if you're sitting there going, I don't think I would ever use any of these, that's probably true. A lot of people may not use any of these. There may not be a need for any of these, but we include them because they're ones that come up and people asked about them at the last meeting or 2 meetings ago. And I am seeing questions come in, Marissa. So what's the best way to go about that? I think it's more appropriate that I get to the questions than that I.
Yeah, absolutely. This question is, do people use tabling incorrectly? I thought if you table a motion, it pretty much kills it indefinitely.
If your question is, do people use motions incorrectly? Yeah, all the time. And we try to restate it in a way to get them where they want to be. Tabling a motion in general is you're correct. If you table a motion, it means to lay it on the table. It means we're done with that. We're not considering that again. That is the strict parliamentary interpretation of what tabling a motion is. It's not used very often. It is a way to remove. We disfavor things that end debate and consideration of the body. By the same token, if that's the decision of the body that we don't want to deal with that anymore, there are mechanisms to do that. Yes, and tabling would be one. A lot of these phrases, if they seem antiquated, that's because they are. They go back in some cases to the 17th century, 16th century. In some cases, we got these rules from England, brought them over here. And so we still use a lot of the old terminology. Tabling would be one of those things where at the time they had the actual copy of the motion, they would, or the issue, put it on the table. We're not dealing with it anymore. That's where that comes from.
Yeah, and then a point here about I move to close debate, call the question. If we go back up top, point of order, I'll have to get clarification on if called a question is not. I don't know if we can prevent the allowance of that entirely. What are your thoughts about that,
I have to, I did this. Here's my disclaimer. I did this separate from the other handouts that were going on. So if there's something that is incorrect I don't recall there being anything in our rules of procedure about stopping that.
Right.
It may have been discussed and it may be something that people wanted to do. It would be a very generally a disfavored motion. You don't like to stop people from debating, and it may not come up at all because you only have 10 minutes period, right?
Yeah.
So,
I think what happened last year is that folks got frustrated and called the question because they did want to cease the debate, but really they wanted a point of order because they weren't sure that things were being done the right way. So up top, we talk a lot about point of order as the preferred mechanism for really asking, are the right rules being followed? Are the rules being followed in general right now?
right.
Yeah.
And again, I like to, for this group, as opposed to something like, let's say, the Senate, I would encourage our chair, and I'm sure that will be the case, to give a lot of latitude to help people get where they want to be that restating motions or perhaps making some rulings to reframe things. Because I don't want, my goal is not to shut you down because you said something the wrong way, because you did the wrong pull down menu. That's not where we're coming from. We're trying to streamline this and make it work for everybody. And I think we can get there. I do. It's again, I view us as a collegial body. I think, you only have 2 days to do your business. So I'm more cognizant of the time constraints than perhaps the debate constraints. But Robert's Rules has all kinds of motions in it. It's hundreds of pages long. Knock yourself out if that's your thing. But if it's not your thing, then don't worry about it. If you have a specific question, ask it. If you want to do something, the more you can do in advance, the better. That's true both from the political end of things with talking to your colleagues. It's always amazing to me when I do these things. People will talk to everyone but the person that can help them. They're talking to me instead of talking to their colleague who could maybe help them withdraw the amendment or do something like that. So the more of that kind of stuff you can sort out in advance, the better. If you have to do a parliamentary motion and you're not sure and you have the opportunity, talk to me, talk to somebody at the front. If we have that kind of, even before the meeting starts, we can, I would like to script things for you if that's useful to you. So you say, Mike, this is what I want to do. I don't know how to do it. No problem. Give me 10 minutes, 5 minutes. We'll script it. This is what you say. This is when you say it.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. We are at 1 o'clock, so that's time. And it's a long time for us to be talking at you. Not a lot of questions from y'all today, but I bet you'll have them as you think about this. And so I guess what I would offer and invite is, as Mike and I are thinking through how to help prepare you and the rest of the body for General Assembly for the most successful possible experience for all of you, what are the key areas or elements of this that you'd like for us to dig into more to help you prepare? Would you like that in a live webinar setting? Could we do some recordings? Like what's the best way for us to get you ready, essentially, generally, and then specifically what issue areas would you like for us to dig into? And so while you all are doing a lot of this other work, unpacking the General Assembly Handbook this month, I guess I would ask for you to be paying attention from your fellow board members, what questions are coming up. And if you can answer them, please let us know what questions are being asked, and we'll be sure we're covering answers to those questions in our future presentations, because we do have to do a couple different ways of training leading up to General Assembly. So we're planning on doing some live webinars, some recorded webinars, some short ones, some long ones, a variety of all. So it would be helpful to know what will be most useful to you. Looks like examples of items that have been scripted was something that was requested. So we'll talk about that next time. So we meet again August something. And in between now and then, please don't be a stranger. If you don't already have my contact information, I will be sure you get it here. My email address, my phone number. And if it's not a question for me, but for Mike, Mike, do you mind if I put your email address in the chat?
I guess I can do it while you're talking.
Yeah, if you don't mind, sure.
I mean,
I don't
I've
have
been
it memorized, which is
known to
silly.
type. I've been known to type.
Nice, good. So again, please consider us a resource. Don't hesitate to ask. And that could mean while you're actually in a work session or a board meeting, you need to text me and ask a question. I will work to try to get you an answer real time. Thanks for being here, and appreciate all your investment in this so that we can have the best possible General Assembly this September.